Looking to take your sports knowledge to the next level? Just a fan of wrestling and entertainment? You're in the right place. Welcome to The Show with your hosts, Hollywood JDT and Stuntman Kirk.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of The Show, or as Stuntman has called it, the Kirkman and some other guy show lately. Either way, it's the...
That's how my family refers to it as. So I was just trying to let you know what they think of you.
Well, I know there's some members of your family that probably don't like me so much, but it's okay. No, guys, welcome to the first episode of 2020. Sorry for the delay. I know it's been kind of at least a couple months since we've given you guys any content. Since me and Kirk have been together, it's been 4 months now, probably, or 3 at least. It's been a little bit, but we're back. Kirk, what you got?
Well, yeah, definitely appreciate everyone's patience. All I can tell you is life events happen, and it's been kind of a crazy few months here for us, both of us actually, and not that we were trying to neglect anything with the show, but we obviously have other commitments that we have to take care of first. You have your family, I have my wife, and my family who's sometimes needs my time as well as my job. So we appreciate it. We apologize, but hopefully we'll get back on a more regular schedule going forward. So we're not taking these long lapses in between shows. Obviously, a lot's happened since our last show. So let's get started.
All right, guys. Well, let's cover it. Let's get into it. It is Super Bowl week, guys. It's this weekend. We're only a few days away from there being a brand new NFL champion. It is the 49ers against, unfortunately, the Kansas City Chiefs. Stuntman, what say you? Who is your pick?
This is we talked about this a little bit before. This is tough for me because obviously I'm a huge Broncos fan, born and raised in Denver. I bleed orange and blue, so no part of me whatsoever wants to see Kansas City win this game. I don't care if it's been 50 years, it could be another 50 years before they even sniff a Super Bowl. I can care less if it's about Lamar Hunt and the Chiefs' legacy and all that stuff. It's just no love lost for the Chiefs, that's for sure. But having said that, looking at the matchups, I think for San Francisco to even have a chance to win this game, honestly, they'd have to hold Kansas City to 28 or actually less than 28 points, which I just don't see them being able to do. They have a great defense. They have a great running game. Kyle Shanahan's definitely learned from his father as far as mastering a game plan and how to use the talent he has to the best, most efficient way to win games. But I just think Kansas City is just way too talented. Patrick Mahomes is playing lights out. I just think, everything is lining up for them to win this game and kind of, I don't want to say win it handedly because I think my score is probably somewhere between, 35 maybe Kansas City and 21 or 24 San Francisco. And I think San Francisco probably, like most of the teams have so far in the playoffs, are probably start off strong, maybe come out to a lead or so. But I think at the end of the day, any team that can score 28 points in a quarter to come back 24 points down after being dominated, I just don't know how you stop that. If you stop Patrick Mahomes, they have Tyreek Hill. If you stop Tyreek Hill, they have Travis Kelce. That offensive line is playing stout. I don't see a scenario where San Francisco, talent for talent can win this game. The only way they could do it is by coaching. And as much as I respect Kyle Shanahan as a coach, I just don't see him being able to out-game plan Andy Reid. So I'm going to go final score 35-24 Kansas City. Breaks my heart to say that, and it's going to be a painful few weeks afterwards, but that's what I'm going to go with.
You are a horrible fan. I truly get what you mean, and I get what you say. I have to go with what Pat Bowen said, that you never vote for a division rival to win the Super Bowl. I'm going to hold true on that one and say, that's why I'm going to go for the 49ers. That's where, I have to put it. But, looking at everything, I mean, even like looking at like a different level, like I have two coworkers, one who's a 49ers fan and is a pain in the butt, and one that's a KC fan and he's a pain in the butt with his team. And I'm sure I'm a pain in the butt with the Broncos and the Vikings, but, I have to hate KC more. So I'm going to, unfortunately have to cheer on for the 49ers. But I think when you look at the matchup, taking all that out of it, looking at the matchup, I honestly think it's a pretty good matchup. I think, you look at KC, they have the offense they have. They have a firepower offense that will put, be down 21 points, can come back and score 50 and just run away with it. But on the defensive side of that, they don't have a very good running game. They don't, or a good run defense. They don't really have a good solid run or a good pass defense even. They're in that kind of middle of the road, and their special teams hasn't been what it was in years past. Look at the 49ers, and they do have a very solid, strong defense that has gotten stronger throughout the playoffs and gotten more healthy. And then you look at their special teams has been on fire with what they've been able to do with returns and being able to actually gain yards. And their offense does what it needs to do. They're not pass heavy on it, but they are very run heavy. I mean, I think Jimmy G had 8 passes in the championship game.
Yeah, something like that.
But they had 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns and just a ton of rushing yards. And I think honestly that's going to be what is going to hurt KC. I know when we talked earlier and about it, I was kind of back and forth, but I really think the more and more, I honestly feel like this is going to be a game that KC gets worked. I think KC is going to get exposed for not being more balanced, not having a stronger defense. I think they're going to get ran all over. The clock's going to get controlled that way. They're not going to have the time to be able to come back from being down by 20 and just have the unlimited time that they had, where I think the 49ers are going to keep pounding and pounding and pounding with it and just run that clock and get the points they need. I truly think it's going to be a game that's in the 20s, but I think it's definitely going to be maybe to the 30s, but I don't think it's going to be some massive kind of one-sided affair. And I think at the end of it, it's going to be the 49ers coming out. But,
I think
that's my
to your point. To your point, I will say this. Everything that San Francisco does well is kind of Kansas City's weakness. And it's a good matchup really for San Francisco in terms of they have the defensive front and the secondary to, I guess, of all the teams so far that they've played in the playoffs, Kansas City, I'm speaking of, probably has the best chance to slow him down. And they don't run the ball. Kansas City is not a running football team, obviously. I mean, they're barely adequate. I wouldn't even say that. I'm being generous, I think, when I say barely adequate. But so, I mean, they pretty much rely on their receivers, on Kelsey, on Patrick Mahomes, just to throw it downfield, make big plays. So that in that sense, it matches up with San Francisco very well. And like I said, Kyle Shanahan, from what I've seen, I don't have a lot of experience with the 49ers, but he definitely comes from that that Mike Shanahan coaching tree where, I mean, he game plans for his opponents and he'll just play whatever team he has and whatever players he has. He's going to put them in the right places for them to make plays and for them to play well. And I got to be clear to everyone here. Nowhere in my heart or in my head do I want Kansas City to win this game. Even if I'm picking them, I will be more than pleased and happy than more so if they lose than just have it be right on a pick. I don't want Kansas City to win. It's not my desire. Being an AFC West guy, even, or an AFC fan, I can care less about anyone in this division winning another Super Bowl except the Broncos. So be clear on that. But I just, at the end of the day, you're talking about the quarterback matchups. Can Jimmy Garoppolo really go out there and match toe for toe, point for point, kind of deal with Patrick Mahomes? And I just don't see that. I think Kansas City is just way too deep into their philosophy and their playbook and knowing what they need to do. And like I said, I mean, even if you're down 21 points in any quarter of this game, I mean, Kansas City knows they can score 28 points in a quarter like that. So for me, I'm just going to stick with, the more talented team the more veteran team, the team that's kind of had this experience, that's kind of been there, even though they haven't won a championship game for years. They've been a perennial playoff team now for several years. So I think they're a little bit more primed and ready to win this game than San Francisco will be. For me, I'm just obviously, as any Super Bowl, besides ones the Broncos play where you just want them to dominate, I'm just hoping for a good, fun game. So,
well, I still think that you're just a horrible fan.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm sure if that's
no matter
the worst
how you
thing,
want to spin it.
if that's the worst thing someone thinks about me this today or this week or whatever, I think I can live with that. So.
I've thought of worse about you this week, but we won't.
we
won't discuss that on the podcast. Hey, so talking about that, what do you? I mean, Denver did better than being at the bottom. I mean, obviously the Chargers, which was our pick. I mean, my first one, your second one after Luck randomly retired. They just bottomed out. I mean, talk about, you mentioned it when we talked earlier, Rivers just disappearing and suddenly just being nothing. They're at the bottom. You're kind of matched up pretty well there with the Raiders, where honestly they're probably above the Raiders right now with the way that team was playing at the end of the year. The Broncos, I mean. But what do you think Denver needs to do to be able to compete with KC? I mean, as much as we hate to admit it, KC is the number one in this division. They got that offense. They got that firepower. What does Denver have to do to compete with it? Because we saw the two games this year. We didn't score a touchdown, I think, in either of them, and we just got destroyed in those games. How do we compete? How do we get back to being equal?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously there's two schools of thought, and I've listened and kind of analyzed both. So there's one school of thought is, you beef up the offense, throw a bunch of talent and playmakers out there and then just try to match them point for point. And then there's the other school of thought that, no, you got to get pass rusher, secondary. You got to hold them. You got to hit Patrick Mahomes. You gotta make him, make quicker decisions or bad decisions, whatever. Not to cop out here. I'm probably a little bit, but hopefully by the end of my point, I'll kind of give you an answer. But I do know for a fact that they can't win football games consistently, and they definitely won't catch the Chiefs scoring 17 points a game. That's what they averaged last year for the most part. It got better once Drew Lock went in there finally. The Kansas City Blizzard notwithstanding, will kind of give them a pass for it. But generally speaking, the offense looked more cohesive. It looked more consistent. It scored more points with Drew Lock in there. So you're kind of anticipating that with him, with another season under his belt, with him learning the offense a little bit better, even with a new offensive coordinator that, he's going to have to probably redesign the playbook, maybe to Drew Lock's favor, hopefully. But you kind of figure that they're going to score more points. Now, I think the ballpark they need to get to is about 24 points, give or take a point. That's 3 touchdowns and a field goal. If they can average that a game, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be a wild card team, and they have a shot, very outside shot, depending on what happens with Kansas City and their offseason, to maybe catch the Kansas City Chiefs off guard. So I think that needs to be the focus. And how do you do that? Well, you need to get your tackle situation straightened out. I think Garrett Bowles is going to be your left tackle next year. He played better down the stretch. So, you're kind of hoping Mike Munchak will continue that progress and that development with him, and he'll continue to improve into his 5th year. But then you got Juwan James on the right tackle. I mean, according to the Broncos, it's up to him whether he wants to play. Nothing is preventing him from playing except his own idea of how well or how injured or not injured he feels he is. So, I mean, can you really count on that? Do you really depend on that? I don't know. That's not something I can answer. There's no good right tackles, I don't think, really, for free agency wise. There's a lot of good tackles in the draft. They can definitely go that route. So you kind of expect it with one of their, I think, however many picks, I think it's like 9 or 10 picks they have, that they're going to draft a tackle or a guard or a couple offensive linemen, at least somewhere in this draft, to kind of beef up the offensive line. And then you got to look at running back. And, as much as I love Philip Lindsay, and I'm not trying to downplay what he's done, he's been a remarkable player and a great leader for this team, but he is not designed to be an every down back for this team or for any team for that matter in the NFL. He's more of a change of pace back. He's more of a third down back. He's more of a gimmick play, get back, whatever, scat back, whatever terminology you want to use to describe him. I mean, he needs to be utilized a lot better and more efficiently than what they've been doing with him because the lack of, I guess, help, which brings me to Royce Freeman. They need to get a different running back than Royce Freeman. I don't know what happened. He dropped off this year. He just did not see the holes very well. He did not have any power. He was pretty much useless while he was out there, which when you do that, you have to depend on Philip Lindsay more and give him more carries. And he's just not that kind of back, in my opinion. It's not that he can't be dynamic or useful for you, but I just think they need to use him differently, which means they need to get another every down kind of workhorse running back. And then obviously you're kind of hoping Noah Fant continues to develop. Cortland Sutton, same thing. So that means you got to get probably another outside, fast, quick, speedy wide receiver who could just, 4 seconds, he's already, downfield. You could just toss it up to him and hope he catches it or it goes out of bounds or either way. That you have a little bit more talent there. So for me, I feel like they do need to score more points. But if you're asking me, can they go point to point with Kansas City? No. And I think if they try to do that, especially in another offseason that they fired an offensive coordinator and they're going to be implementing a completely new offensive philosophy, it doesn't make sense because Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are so intricate and so deep into what they're doing and the playbook and what they are successful at that them trying to do this on the fly and catch up to Kansas City by scoring more points just doesn't make sense. So with that, you do need to continue to get pass rushers and, edge rushers are, not too difficult to come by. You don't have to necessarily have, a Von Miller type pass rusher to get to the quarterback, but just someone who can, get in there and smack the quarterback and, hit his hands or hit him, hit his chest, just kind of get him off guard to get Patrick Mahomes uneasy and off his game a little bit because he's had the Broncos number. He is undefeated in all of his starts against the Broncos, both in Kansas City and here. So, if the Broncos don't want to turn this into a situation where the Chiefs are the New England Patriots and we're the Bills or the Jets or the Dolphins trying to chase them, then they need to make sure that, they keep Patrick Mahomes honest. So I guess the bottom line is they do need to do better on offense, and I think they will. And I don't think they have to jump too significantly to do better on offense to compete with Kansas City. But I definitely feel their defensive front and their pass rush specifically has to be on point, and they have to invest into that, and they have to continue to develop that and get after Patrick Mahomes. And just that's the only thing that you could really do to get a great quarterback off his game is to continue to hit him. So.
No, and I agree. I think, the one thing I liked that I've heard so far this offseason is one that we got rid of the offensive coordinator that I couldn't stand. And I know we've had back and forth with that, but the one thing I liked most of all was Von Miller saying, he had mentioned that he had like a trip planned to Australia or somewhere. And last year he didn't work out with the same guy and go to the same, death camp that he goes to and everything. And he, took for his off-season training. And I think that showed this year. He was definitely slower, didn't have that same just fire to him that he has. But this year, he admitted that in the offseason, said he didn't do it, and said he looked at it and said, if I have 3 weeks to go to Australia for vacation, I got 3 weeks to go train. So I'm going to go train. He's going back to do that he can, try to get himself back. And I'm sure that there's some selfish part on his side because at the end of this year, his contract goes to like $22 million as the cap hit, but they can get out of it. So after this one, after the season, they could walk from him and be able to, move on and not have as much of a cap hit, where if they keep him, then that cap hit hits a lot harder. But, he wants to play, he wants to be here and everything with it. But I think this gives him that opportunity to really step up and be there, which is what that offense needs, or what the defense needs. And then you look at, Bradley Chubb coming back and getting healthy, and, hopefully we re-sign Wolf, and, Simmons, it sounds like is, going to be coming back. And, just looking at those various positions, I think our defense has the ability, at least in that front group, to get better just even with the guys we have. That should help us with being able to kind of control that pocket, keeping pressure in there on him and everything. When it comes to Mahomes, the thing that worries me is our cornerbacks, not knowing what's going on with Harris, or if they're going to re-sign him, not really sure where our backups are at after that. That, to me, that's the bad part. And that's where I honestly feel like they need to really put some focus to. They need to find somebody who's a straight speed kind of cornerback that can chase down anybody, stay with anybody, and be able to, match up at the speed that, Hill and, some of those guys have with KC, to match up. If they can keep up with those guys, they're going to do well against others. And then you look
Sorry, go ahead.
I say, and then you look at the offense, and the issue with the offense, I think we saw some of it start to turn around. We saw, Noah Fant actually start to come alive towards the end of the season. It seemed like him and Locke had some good chemistry kind of going there, with him finding him when he needed to and hitting the spots. Sutton, like you said, he took off this year, really stepped up and became more quietly than not, but became that player that they thought he could be. It's finding that number two. Is it Hamilton? If he can keep a hold of the ball, is it going to be, somebody new? And they definitely need that number two, number three receiver to be a little bit bigger of a presence than what they've had. But I like where we're at with Locke. I like the offensive coordinator change. I think that's going to be a good thing for him and for the offense in general, to build off of that, not trying to go with whatever we were doing, in the first part of last year. Even with Locke, there were still plays where you're like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Like, why are we giving these guys no opportunity, to do anything? And then there's times where we shouldn't give an opportunity, and we were. And it just seemed very out of it for an offensive coordinator who had never been one, and it was kind of in over his head, at least from my view.
The show with your hosts, Hollywood JDT and Stuntman Kirk. We'll be right back.
Rotella Resale offers thousands of products in over 50 categories. Fast and free shipping on every order, lowest prices, as well as a price matching program. Forget those massive retail sites with numerous sellers or massive box stores. Shop where you are treated like family. Choose from fine jewelry, tools, die-cast and collectibles, handbags, housewares, toys, footwear, and much more. Use promo code POD and receive 20% off your entire order. All products are brand new and authentic and will ship out the very next day. Visit www.rotellaresale.com. That is www.rotellaresale.com.
Back to the show. Here's your hosts, Hollywood JDT and Stuntman Kirk.
But, I'm encouraged, but I definitely think we need to see a lot of free agency pickup, and we need to see, some good draft picks come in that are going to fill those positions of need this year.
Well, and I think the switch, so going to the offensive coordinator spot. So you and I had lots of discussions throughout the season about this. What I said was, and, just so I'm clear to the audience of where I stand with it, is you hired a first-year head coach and you hired a first-year offensive coordinator who would never call plays on the NFL level. To me, you kind of had to expect growing pains. And I thought, for me personally, I knew this offense from where Gary Kubiak ran it, obviously, of course. Mike Shanahan ran it. Sean McVay ran it. Kyle Shanahan ran it. I mean, so many of these other teams run this offense that it works. And it helps mask some of your deficiencies on the offensive line. Doesn't mean you can have, slugs on the offensive line or bad players on the offensive line, but you can kind of get by with how they design the playbook and everything with, not a strong offensive line. It kind of buys you some time, basically. So for me, with Rich Scangarello, is it wasn't so much that I thought he was this great offensive genius-minded, head or offensive coordinator. It was more or less that I felt like, well, you kind of had to expect that there was going to be issues, but the best thing for this team going forward was not to change offensive coordinators again and not to have to scrap your entire playbook and start over again, which is what they're going to do. Now, having said that, I think Pat Shurmur is a better fit for what they're going to probably do with Drew Lock. I can't imagine they're not going to do more spread formations, more three-wide formations, empty backfield, single back, no fullback kind of deal. Just spread everyone out. Use Noah Fant more as a kind of a slot type receiver and kind of get him out in the open. So I think it's going to be a better fit, and I think for the Broncos as a whole and for Vic Fangio, I think it works better because, as people have talked about, now he doesn't have to worry about the offense. Now he can just kind of defer to Pat Shurmur, who's been there, done that. He's been doing it for years. He does run a West Coast style of offense, which is kind of in the Shanahan-Kubiak realm. It's a little bit more pass-oriented, a little bit more spread than I think we're probably used to seeing. Maybe more like, Peyton Manning, Adam Gase kind of stuff. But I think that might be good for Drew Lock because I think Drew Lock is a spread quarterback. So I think it'll work out for him in the sense that, he'll just be able to line up at the line of scrimmage, spread everyone out and, have plenty of options and get the ball out to him. But with that, it comes the drawback of you got to beef up your offensive line, and we got to go back to the tackles, and we got to go back to, the center. McGovern, I think, is a free agent this year, is he not? So
No,
they got to get a new center too, or at least.
No, he's still with us.
Is he still with us? Are you sure?
Yeah, I think so because the fan was talking that he was kind of going to be like that. That they were good with him remaining as the centerpiece on that, and they didn't think he needed a change.
Fair enough. Well, if they have him, then that means I thought he played well throughout the season, so I don't have a problem with his play at center.
I thought Reisner played really well too.
He did. He had a game or two that he played like a rookie, like you'd expect. But no, I think we're set at guard. I think we're for the most part we got a good center if we keep McGovern or if he stays with this team. But I don't see a scenario where I don't see a scenario where Garrett Bowles is back after the 2020 season. I don't see a scenario where Juwan James plays all 16 games next year. It's just not in his makeup. And it's not in his history to do that. So, if you're going to spread everyone out and, leave your offensive line one-on-one with pass rush, then you got to make sure you got good offensive linemen ready to block for your quarterback, or Drew Lock's going to be on his back and hurt pretty quick. And then you got to look into, well, can we win without Drew Lock kind of deal? We didn't this year. I don't know what our record was before he went in there, whatever it was, but we're 4-1 to end the year. So, I mean, he was definitely the best quarterback we had all year. And, you kind of hope they continue to develop that. And that's key too. And kind of lost in this whole conversation, I think you and I talked about, I mean, you probably touched upon it more than I did, is you got to continue to build your offense around Drew Lock. Don't go into this, this crazy, Tom Brady may be available, Phillip Rivers may be available, Drew Brees may be available. You never know, but don't get in this mindset of, well, if we could just get this quarterback, then, we're just one, put a couple pieces around him and then we're right back in the Super Bowl contention. I'm tired of that. You're not, Tom Brady is not Peyton Manning when we signed Peyton Manning in 2012. Tom Brady's got much more mileage on him. He's definitely lost a few steps. This would not be a good environment for him. Same with Phillip Rivers. Drew Brees might be a better fit just because I think Drew Brees still is very prolific in passing. But for me personally, just build your team around Drew Lock. What do you need, Drew? What plays do you run well, Drew? What can we do to put you in the best position possible to be successful? We saw with a few games this year, again, the Kansas City game notwithstanding, that he is capable of, throwing the ball a few times and being efficient, throwing the ball a lot and being efficient. He had turnovers in his first couple games, and then his last few games he didn't. So, I mean, he learns from his mistakes. He seems like he's a smart guy. He seems very energetic and stuff. So, like, let's just build this team around Drew Lock for the next 3-4 years. Really plan, get this offense geared towards Drew Lock and what he's about. And then if after 3 or 4 years it's not working or he's not the guy, then you move on. But don't bring in a Tom Brady. Don't bring back Joe Flacco. We don't need any of that. Let's just go with Drew Lock, make him the starter. Let's get all behind him. And that's what worries me about this team is they're so win now and like they just want to get it to back on track and get it right, back to Super Bowl contention that you just fear the end result's going to be them signing one of these, in my opinion, washed up over the hill quarterbacks that they don't need to deal with right now. So I'm hoping that's what they wind up doing. I think that's what they're going to wind up doing. I think that's what kind of Pat Shurmur's here to do. But, with John Elway, you got these quarterback free agent class available. You just don't know what his mindset is. And he may decide, well, I'm just going to bring in a Tom Brady or a Phillip Rivers for now and then put Drew Lock back on the bench and let Drew Lock develop a little bit more because I think he needs more time. And then that way we could be competitive now. I hope not, but we'll see what happens this offseason for sure.
Well, and I think with that, I think if this was last year, and you're coming in with a rookie and you're coming in with the uncertainty, then I could totally see going and even getting Rivers and getting, going and trying after Brady, and trying to get a couple years there where you can get somebody, like that. But with what you saw in Locke and his ability to play and actually get this team to win and move, I don't think it's needed. I mean, they're not coming in as backups. Rivers might come in as a backup somewhere, but he just moved to Florida, so I doubt he's wanting to come back this way, especially in a backup role. But I don't think that's needed. I don't think they're going to look at one of those heavy, one of the heavy classes. And I think you can look back to what happened before with Tebow and Manning. I think the difference was everybody knew that, Tebow just didn't have the same kind of play skill. He was lucky more than he was talent, I think in that sense of it. And I think Elway saw that in everybody else. And while Tebow had earned the right, as he said it, to be the starter going into the year, you don't expect a player like, Manning to come available, who by far was going to make that team better, not just that year, but probably for a few years. Where I think you look at it this year, you look at, Brady's definitely not the player he has been. You saw some physical limitations there. Rivers dang well isn't the player he was. Breeze is probably still the best out of all of them, but I don't think he's going to be leaving, New Orleans or anything. So, you look at that mix and why go anywhere? If you need a veteran backup, you have Flacco there who you're already paying. Might as well keep him and use him as a backup.
Yeah, I'm not really on board with bringing Flacco back. I thought, to me, he clearly showed why Baltimore let him go. We talked about it last year earlier on, I should say, in the 2018 season when, the Broncos had Case Keenum and it wasn't working out. Do you make the move for Flacco? Well, they did. Following year is a year too late. I mean, he is what he is. You could bring him back as a backup, but it's going to cost you $20+ million. I mean, do you really want to invest that much money into a backup quarterback? I don't think so. I mean, the cap hit to release him after the year ends, or the year starts, I should say, is I think like $13 million versus the $20-some million. So they're still saving money off the cap. So to me, it makes sense to move on from Flacco. They can go with a Brandon Allen type quarterback. I'm fine with Brandon Allen as a backup. If they want to kind of go a little bit more veteran, I don't know what other quarterback. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he does well in the spread system. You could always go that route, to kind of get some veteran presence in case Locke does go down with an injury. So, but yeah, I think you and I are on the same page. We feel like Drew Lock has shown enough that, this isn't like Tim Tebow. With no disrespect to Tim Tebow, I want to state this emphatically. I actually thought that was a very, very exciting year for the Broncos, and that was a great playoff win we had. I actually think the world of Tim Tebow as a person and as a guy, but I think most people in evaluating that 2011 season knew that wasn't sustainable, and you weren't going to build. I mean, Tim Tebow wasn't going to be like a Lamar Jackson situation where suddenly he was going to be able to throw the ball dramatically well and improve so much more the following year that it was going to justify you staying with him. You pretty much knew he was going to be a below 50% passer, great athleticism, but you're going to have to run the hell out of the ball and hope for the best. So different dynamics there. Drew Lock is not Tim Tebow. He's definitely more capable of throwing the ball. He's more accurate. He's more versatile. He's got a better arm. So I think talent for talent, we're in a better position, obviously, than we were back then. So it just doesn't make logical sense to me to move on from Drew Lock so quickly or to bench Drew Lock and, put him back under the kind of a red shirt status. But I just know this team, and John Elway's got 2 years left on his contract, and they got 2 years left. The trust does, and they don't want to wait and be another 8-8, 7-9 team. They want to be 10-6, 11-5 kind of realm, and they're going to be looking at the best way to do that. And in their mind, hey, we could bring in a Super Bowl caliber quarterback and Tom Brady, a little bit lesser degree than Phillip Rivers. And then we can attract some of these bigger name free agents who are going to be like, well, I want to go play with Tom Brady. I want to go play with Tom Brady. That New England may not necessarily be willing to spend the money on to kind of beef up the offense, which that makes sense too in that regard. But I just, like I said, I think you're on the same page. Just stick with Drew Lock, build a team around him. If it doesn't work out after 3 or 4 years, what's the harm? I mean, you just move on to the next guy or try again. I just think that he's shown enough, and I think there's enough positives there to develop him as a player.
No, I agree right there with you. I think the worst thing Locke did this year was dance on the sidelines.
Was that
truly probably the most you could.
Was that just because he sucks at dancing, or because you just don't feel a quarterback should be dancing?
Did you watch him dance?
I did. It was entertaining.
It wasn't good.
I've never seen a quarterback do that on the sideline. I mean, could you imagine Peyton Manning rapping on the sideline like that? Or Tom Brady even?
No. But I mean, all joking aside, I agree. I think, the Block has done nothing to not deserve to be there. You got to go with him, and you got to try to finish it out. You got to see what you have. Moving on. If you moved, you're probably going to do more damage to him by having a different veteran try to start. And then if they struggle, then what? You just paid another ton of money to, a veteran for the guy who showed this last year that he can step up and play. You're going to do it again. Like that makes no sense. So, I think that fantasy booking is going to be out the window at this point, and I think it is the Lock train, and hopefully they just get the pieces around him to make it better.
Totally agree.
What else did we have to talk about on our list? What do you have to talk about? I mean, it's been a lot since we really talked sports-wise and everything else. I know wrestling, we're going to talk about that in an episode in that. We'll get into that. But tell me, what's on the Stuntman's mind?
Well, it's been like we talked about a little at the beginning of the show. It's been crazy few months here. Again, that's not an excuse. I mean, it takes maybe an hour a week to sit down and do this show, but you just kind of get exhausted, and it kind of takes a little bit of energy to kind of get up to be able to talk about some of this stuff as we do with, the passion we have. And The other side of it too, the Broncos weren't doing too hot there for a while. I think it probably would have made more sense to do this during when Drew Lock went in. We actually started winning some games. Could have talked about that a little bit, but it's kind of a down year. So I think that's part of why we didn't really have a lot of discussions about sports or anything. But so I guess we could talk about a little bit since we touched upon it with the Broncos. So where do you think these quarterbacks are going to wind up? Leaving Andy Dalton out of it, because I think, Andy Dalton I wouldn't necessarily talk about as a top tier quarterback or a top tier free agent quarterback, but for your opinion, where do you see Tom Brady, Drew Brees, or Philip Rivers going or landing or winding up?
Well, I think if we're going, just straight first thoughts, I think, Brees stays with I think he stays with the Saints. I think, while they have Bridgewater, who showed that he is, recovering and back to kind of being who he was and even better from where he was when he was in Minnesota. He's not, I don't think, in a rush to want to take over. I don't think they're in a rush to have him take over. I don't think the other guy they have who's like tight end / QB, I can't think of his name now. I don't think he's, the answer there. I think, Brees showed he can still play and still do well. I don't think he really showed any real struggles. So I think they sign him. He'll probably do like he's done, where it's more of a team-friendly style deal, so they can bring in some more weapons and try to get somebody, a piece or two there, a running back or more, somebody to help boost that up a little bit too for them. And, they had a good year. Minnesota took it to them. And I don't think there's much change there needed, other than they just continue to do what they've done and keep building and try to get better, probably more on the defensive side for them. I think Brady.
Just real quick before we move on for the Drew Brees thing. So I was just looking at his stats while you were talking about it. Despite missing 6 games, the dude still threw for nearly 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns. So in 10 games, 27 touchdown passes, only 4 picks. So, I mean, to me, of the 3 quarterbacks we're talking about here, he is definitely probably still the most capable talent-wise, physically.
Exactly. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. He was with, he was with San Diego before he got hurt, and thought he was going to be there, and that didn't pan. And then he thought his career was over, and then he, gets a whole new career pretty much. I don't see him wanting to have to do a third run with another team, I don't think he'll go back to San Diego or anything like that. So I think he stays where he's at. What's your thoughts on Brees? Let's go with that, and then we'll kind of look at Brees along.
Well, there's been some speculation as of, I think, the last 24 hours or so that he's leaning towards retirement, which makes sense. I mean, they've been, ever since they won that Super Bowl, it's been, 10 years now, give or take. They've been kind of just chasing that kind of, that carrot, that dangling carrot. And they've had some good seasons. They've had some bad seasons in between. And he's been very consistent. So I think for him, he's like, maybe he's just, it's the end of the road. Maybe he's just like tired and worn out. And he's not wanting to just do a 1-year deal or whatever with New Orleans and keep doing these 1-year deals. So I don't know, maybe he will retire. I think of all the 3, he's he's the front runner to retire. By far. So I think if of the 3 quarterbacks, the 3 big quarterback names available, if any of them retire, it's going to be him. I agree with you, though, at the end of it, that if he does wind up coming back for another season, it's going to be with New Orleans. I think it really just depends. I think New Orleans, if they want him back, they got to kind of roll out the red carpet, show him a lot of love, show like, hey, we want to build this offense, continue to, they're already talented as it is. It's not like they're lacking talent. They're one of the best teams in the NFL, even being a wild card team, but they're still a very talented football team. So for them, the step for going from where they were to a Super Bowl contender is not really that hard. They just need to, manage their games better, play a little bit better, and, execute a little better. Really, I think the loss in the playoffs against Vikings and really the last few years have been on Sean Payton. As great of a coach as he is, he's kind of led them astray in the playoffs in these losses they've had. If you're talking going back to Minnesota, if you're going back to the Rams last year or going to Minnesota this year, I really think it's coaching deficiencies that are hindering him up in the playoffs. I don't think it's anything Drew Brees is doing. I don't think it's anything from a talent standpoint. So I'm in agreement with you. If he does do anything besides retirement, it's going to be coming back being a starting quarterback for the Saints.
No, and I agree. I didn't know about the retirement talk, but I think that's to me the two options. If he does retire, he goes out on his terms, how he wants, and it's on a good year. Or I think it's the Saints. I think Rivers, honestly, I can see Rivers I think Rivers is going to stay in Florida. I mean, first and foremost. And honestly, I think Tampa Bay is probably where he's going to wind up. I think his family's out there. He moved his whole 50 kids out there. There was 4 buses taking them all out there or something weird like that. But I think he.
Just saying Partridge Family songs on the way there, the buses.
Yeah. I definitely think he's going to want that warmer weather. I think Tampa's probably where he's going to, if he continues, which I don't see him not wanting to keep playing. Tampa is going to be moving away from what it sounded like was going to be moving away from what's their guy? Winston.
Yeah.
Who was 50-50 on touchdowns and interceptions was equal. I think that's not that.
That's over 5,000 yards though.
He did, but he also threw 30 interceptions. So,
yeah, 27 touchdowns, 27 picks, something like that.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think they know who he is and what he brings to the table, and I just don't think that he's gonna. I don't think they're gonna keep him there at this point. I can see that change happening. I mean, he's been benched before because of his play. I think this year he just kept finding ways to keep him going. But I think ultimately that's where he's going to wind up. I think Fitzpatrick's probably staying with Miami, so I don't necessarily think he would go there. But if Fitzpatrick's out of Miami, I could easily see Rivers sliding in there. Jacksonville's kind of the one group that's out of it because they paid a ton of money to one quarterback who got hurt and then sucked when he did come back. Probably wishes he would have stayed in Philly at that point. And they probably wish they would have kept him. But I think he's definitely going to be in one of the Florida teams. Tampa's where I'm thinking he winds up.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So he's definitely coming back. I think he's indicated that he's not coming back to San Diego. That's more or less been made official. I don't think it's actually been, it's not like
they said they weren't bringing him back.
So that's actually is official. San Diego's not bringing him back. So we know he's not. Or, sorry, we keep saying San Diego, Los Angeles. We've said San Diego, I think, referred to the Chargers this entire time. They are the Los Angeles Chargers now. We apologize, folks. It's hard for us to deal with that. And it's going to be harder to deal with when Oakland's in Vegas this year. So, or not Oakland, obviously, but the Raiders. But, it's kind of an interesting scenario for Rivers because, a lot of people are reading into the Florida thing. Well, he's got family in Florida. He's from not Florida area, but I mean, he played in North Carolina. He's from Alabama. So, kind of that southern panhandle, whatever you want to call it. That's kind of his area, and it kind of wouldn't be out of the realm for him to go back to Florida and still play for another team that might need his services. But I'm kind of in agreement with you. I mean, you have he is in Florida now. You got 3 teams that theoretically would need quarterbacks. Even Jacksonville, as much as they spend on Nick Foles, didn't pan out. So now you got to kind of ask yourself as the Jacksonville team, hey, what are we going to do at the quarterback spot? Because, do we go in with Gardner Minshew and, see if he continues to develop and play well? I don't know. He beat us, so, I mean, good for him. But a lot of quarterbacks did that this year. But, is he really the guy to, lead your franchise for the next 10 or 15 years or even to get you back in the playoffs for the next 2 or 3 years as Phillip Rivers might? I don't know. They'll have to answer that. They're probably the least likelihood of signing him. So really it boils down to Miami or Tampa Bay. Miami's wouldn't shock me. I know they like Fitzpatrick. I think they'd be fine going with him for another season, kind of as a transition year while they draft and develop a quarterback. But, they may decide, especially if Tom Brady moves on from New England, that, hey, this is kind of our window. We can kind of jump back into things here, the thick of it. And if we sign a Phillip Rivers, kind of, cater an offense around him, we might actually be back in the playoff hunt. So, and they actually played well in a lot of their games this year. They started off, poorly, and it looked like they were just going to tank for the whole year to get one of these top tier quarterbacks. And then they wound up bouncing back and actually fighting and playing hard down the stretch. So to credit to their coaching staff, of course, and how well Fitzpatrick played after playing to being benched and then playing again. But, I would agree with you. I think Tampa Bay makes the most sense. They're going to move on from Jameis Winston. They didn't pick up his option. I don't think they're going to rework a contract. I think Winston probably is inclined to move on to a different team to kind of get a different environment and different mindset on him. He's one of those quarterbacks, man, where, either he's on fire and you're like, damn, this guy can play, or you're just like, what is he doing out there? So I think Tampa Bay probably makes the most sense. It's a veteran coaching staff. So, Phillip Rivers will go in there, probably mesh very well with everyone. So I would agree with you. I think Tampa Bay seems like the most likely place for him to go.
And, Brady, it's a hard thing with him because I just don't know I know that Kraft has said that they want him back and they're going to do what they can to get him back. There's a part of me and part of this is my hate for those guys, for New England in general, but I'm sure it kind of roots in there. But, really to me, my bigger push with it is I think there's more of an issue between, and I felt that, we've talked about it, I feel this way for a while. I feel like there's that battle between Brady and Belichick where one of them wants to see if they can do it without the other. And as much as they've had success together and they'll be good, I think they still have that piece of, I want to prove it's me and not because of him, or prove that I can do it without him. And it doesn't have to be this combination thing. It would not surprise me if really push comes to shove and they get into, really get down to it, to see Brady come back and Belichick be the one that goes.
That's a bold prediction, sir.
I'm not saying that's happening right now, but I think if Brady comes back and it's not a short-term kind of contract, a year-to-year kind of deal, that's the only way I think Belichick's really going to be on board with it. But I think if it's any kind of true build of a contract where there's time to it, I don't think Belichick's going to want to put that time there. I think he's pissed that, you look at Jimmy G and he wanted him here and he's panned out well. And he's lost everybody he's brought in, to prepare for replacing Tom. I can see there being that if it comes push to shove, I can see him going. And at that case, I think, at that point you have it built in for, our favorite buddy McDaniels to, slide into head coach spot there and, kind of continue the realm at that point.
Man, would that be crazy if if it's like a Vince Young, Jeff Fisher situation where they get rid of Vince Young and then Jeff Fisher still quits. And so you get rid of Tom Brady and then Bill Belichick still walks away or whatever, or vice versa. That'd be an interesting scenario, I think. This is a tough situation because I don't think anyone 5 years ago would have ever envisioned a scenario where Tom Brady still, I think most people would agree he's lost a step over the last 2 years for sure. He's still putting up decent stats though. 24 touchdowns to 8 picks. That's not really nothing to sneeze at. Those are good stats. Still threw for 4,000 yards. A lot of it was just, drop back throw, drop back, dump off, drop back, dump off. So it's not like, he's throwing the ball downfield at all. I don't know if it's an arm talent issue. I don't know if it's an offensive line issue or a combination of both. But, it's so tough because you just never envisioned it, and you just can't imagine, like, well, if everyone's still winning and everyone still is capable, why don't you just make it work until, like, until you can't make it work anymore, which means, obviously that would mean Tom Brady just can't physically do it anymore. Because, I mean, obviously I think Bill Belichick can still coach. Right. So it's weird that it's coming to a point now where it's looking like, no, they're just going to kind of move away from each other. You brought up Jimmy Garoppolo, the talk or rumors, 2 or 3 years ago that, that was going to be the guy, and that's who Bill Belichick wanted, and he didn't want to trade him, and he was more or less forced to do it because Tom Brady put his foot down with Robert Kraft, and to kind of ease that talk and to kind of get things moving back on track, Robert Kraft just kind of traded Jimmy Garoppolo. That's the speculation or rumor anyway. No one's ever obviously going to come out and admit that's what happened, but it's what it looks like. So I don't know. This is really tough. I don't see Bill Belichick leaving the Patriots. He's not really given an indication he wants to do that. Now, I do agree. It depends on what they're willing to do with Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady wants top dollar money. He's tired of taking discounts. He's tired of, he's never been the highest paid player in the league. He's never been even, I don't think he's ever been top 5 or 7 top quarterbacks in the league. All of his money comes from, endorsement deals, merchandise, things like that. So I think for him, he's crossed pretty much every plateau you need to do to be considered the greatest quarterback, except be recognized financially as it. And I don't think he needs to be financially recognized in terms like he's hurting for money. They're living in a box, kind of deal. But I think for him, there is a little bit of a merit or, a badge or, whatever you want to call it, that he gets if he becomes one of the highest paid free agents in history. And I think a team will be willing to make him one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid quarterback, even for a 2-year deal in the NFL. So I think the likely scenario is that Tom Brady's going to move on. There's been speculation. I mean, he's sold his home in New England. He's living in Connecticut, which, it's not like you could throw a stone probably from Foxborough and hit Connecticut, but jokingly, but so it's not like he moved from New England, like Los Angeles to Florida kind of deal. He's still within the same kind of area, but I think it's gearing out towards him moving on. I think you're right. He wants to try to prove that he could do it without Belichick. I think there's definitely some strained relationships there, and it's been developing for a few years. But you're just kind of like, okay, so if Tom Brady leaves, where does he go? Because it's like there are so many teams that are quarterback hungry right now. You could kind of articulate the Broncos being a little bit on the fringe of that, just because Drew Lock is still so unproven. But, you're talking about the Chargers will need one. The Raiders might want one. Especially going to Las Vegas next year. What a coup that would be for them to bring in Tom Brady to usher in the Las Vegas Raiders, under John Gruden's system, the guy who, he defeated to kind of start his career. So there's a lot of things in play. I mean, and then you look at even the NFC. I mean, there's a lot of teams over there that need quarterbacks, and even within his own division. I mean, he can go to Miami. He could go possibly to New York, the Jets. I don't know how invested they are on Sam Darnold. He was hit and miss last year. So it's weird, man. It's a weird situation with him because there's so much uncertainty of the only thing for certain is he's going to play next year. It's just a matter of whether or not they can make it work in New England, which I don't think they will. And at that point, he's going to test the free market. Where does he go? If I had to put money on it, and taking the Broncos out of it because I don't want the Broncos anywhere near the Tom Brady sweepstakes, even though I think they're going to be right in the middle of it, or at least try to be. I'm going to say it's either going to be the Los Angeles Chargers or the Las Vegas Raiders. It just makes the most sense to me. You're talking about both teams kind of trying to develop a new fan base with the Chargers in Los Angeles and the Raiders in Las Vegas, that you bring this Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback in NFL history, arguably, 6-time Super Bowl champion, all the free agents it's going to attract for you, all the fan base it's going to attract for you. I just have a feeling it's going to be one of those two teams. Plus, with Tom Brady, he is from the California area, is Northern California, but Los Angeles isn't necessarily that ridiculously far from where he grew up. So it kind of would make sense for him to go back to California, and his wife and her career for him to be in California. So I could definitely see one of those two scenarios happening with Tom Brady.
I do agree with you on that if he goes anywhere, I do think San Diego again. Los Angeles.
I did it too.
I do think that's the team he'll, most likely to get him. One, they have a lot of cap space, I believe, open, so they can make him that top guy even for a couple years, just to try to. I mean, they have some good players on their team, Hunter Henry, and I can't think of the receiver's name right now, but he's consistently at the top.
Keenan Allen.
So he's been consistently at the top. So I definitely think that there is by far the ability there for them to be able to go after him. And it makes sense. This is their first year that they're going to be in the new stadium, that they have to prove themselves, because we've seen what has happened the last few years. They're playing in a soccer stadium. It's an away game, for them. It's a home game for anyone that comes to play them. So, people travel there easy to come see it. So I think that, them going to a new stadium, they got to prove themselves. They got to get themselves established as that team finally there, and to be able to make it happen. So I think that makes perfect sense. Plus, just like you said, his wife and everything that they're doing, they want to get situated. They want to get in position to be where they want to be. That helps career after being in Hollywood, being right there, in that area. That's going to help the business and everything, and just their marketing even more. So to me, that does make the most sense of where he would go, if it comes down to it. I still believe that if Robert Kraft, and it truly sits on him, if he locks in that, hey, I want him, and it's whatever contract he wants, and they're going to try to throw all the money at him, I think Belichick says, I'm out. And he'll go to another team and turn them into a, Super Bowl headache for everybody. But, I definitely, if that doesn't happen, if they're not going to, kill the team for him, then I think Los Angeles Chargers are probably definitely the team he's going to wind up being with.
So I was actually just looking up this while we're on the subject. CBS Sports is reporting that New Orleans reportedly wants Drew Brees back in 2020 to pass the torch to Taysom Hill. So sounds like New Orleans is on board with bringing Drew Brees back. So really, it's just going to be up to him to decide if he wants to do it one more year, go all out, try to win the Super Bowl with New Orleans, or if he's just like, I've done everything I wanted to do, I'm hanging it up. So I think with Drew Brees, you and I are kind of in agreement on that he's either going to retire or stick with New Orleans. So just a little bit of information that just came across my phone on that.
All right. Well, either way, I think the offseason is going to be fun. It's always fun to see where guys go and what happens and everything else from that. But I think you also got, it's going to be interesting. You got the XFL this year kicking off in like 2 weeks now, I think it is, isn't it? 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, the funny thing, and maybe we could talk more about the XFL in a different show, because we kind of we're running out of time here. I know we've been going on for about an hour, but the XFL isn't doing things quite the way they did it the first time, which is kind of interesting. It looks like they learned from whatever mistakes they felt they made with the first go around, and they're doing some things differently rather than be like the anti-NFL or whatever. They're kind of trying to make the game, I guess, smarter and a little bit more practical. I don't know if you saw what they're doing with the kickoffs, but it actually looks kind of cool. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it on YouTube.
No, I definitely think, we could probably do a whole episode just on that and kind of, getting up for it and kind of the comparisons and how they're going to compare to what the AFA did or the AFL or whatever that 10-week league was. The one thing I know, yeah, I mean, the one thing I know for sure is that, because McMahon and them said it, or, the Oliver said it, their commissioner, was that the league's funded completely for all players for the first year. So, I mean, they have that already in place, taken care of, paid for. So they're not going to get like they had with, the AFL or the AFF, where they get whatever it was called, where they get 3 weeks into the year and they're like, oh, we can't make payroll next week for all these players. Like, how do you not know that going in? Like, what the heck? Where at least, McMahon's put the money up front to cover the whole season. So there won't be a, sudden like, oh, what are we going to do next week kind of attitude. So to me, that's already a step ahead. That's business being better. But I think he's been smarter about what they've done. And I think the way they've set it up and everything else, it's not trying to compete. It's trying to be that off-season team for them, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's going to be a good thing for people that want to watch football and want to get into it. As long as people can separate WWE from, it, I think you'll be fine. So, but that's a whole nother show for later. So like you said, it has been an hour. Anything you want to cover before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so we were going to kind of wait till the end here. We'll touch base on it. So we wanted to obviously extend, both from Josh and myself, our heartfelt prayers and thoughts and whatever you want to call it to the 9 lives that were tragically lost in the helicopter accident on Sunday. Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, of course, with the Lakers, being one of those, as well as his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter. I think they were on their way to a basketball camp or something to do with her basketball training. So, as people know, Kobe Bryant was a controversial figure, at least in the Denver, Colorado area, for what may or may not have happened back in 2003, or, of course, from a more professional standpoint, just being with the Lakers and being kind of a thorn in the Nuggets side for so many years. But as a player, there wasn't many players better, if any, during his era. And he definitely set the example for most everyone else who followed. So with that, just because of the tragic loss in the sports world, for sure, we just want to extend our thoughts and prayers to all the people who have been affected by it, both especially personally, the families who lost loved ones. And then, of course, just from a fan standpoint, people who appreciated Kobe Bryant, definitely wish them well as well.
I'm right there with you. Thoughts are with and prayers are with the families and everyone that was directly affected by it, by what happened. I mean, it truly is one of the biggest tragedy, losing your kid, losing family so suddenly, without any expectation of it. And, there's no way to make that better and make that easy to deal with. So, our heartfelt apology, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody. Yeah.
But with that, I think we did hit pretty much everything we wanted to hit. We'll probably do a show, I would assume, after the Super Bowl, kind of talk about that and get prepped for free agency and maybe talk a little bit about the Rockies. We didn't even get to Arenado and all that mess that's going on with him.
I feel like that's a whole nother show almost kind of built in there, right? Stuntman's got some work to do on catching up with some WWE as we're in the WrestleMania season, and the Royal Rumble just ended. We got to, be able to talk some of that coming up and be able to cover that. So a lot more coming. The dedication, I believe, is back for both of us to really push forward and keep trying to, keep having shows for you guys. My work schedule changing hopefully makes that a little bit easier and kind of adjust some stuff there, along with, my daughter getting a little bit older and that being a little bit easier to manage. Trying to plan out nap times a little bit better. But, until next time, guys, thank you guys for listening to the show. Stuntman, any last words?
Just take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right, guys, we'll catch you later. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Show with Hollywood JDT and Stuntman Kirk. Want to stay in the know on all things sports, wrestling, movies, and TV? Follow the show on social media at The Show Podcast. If you like today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on The Show.